I had a cashier's check for $100,000 burning a hole in the breast pocket of my cheap suit. 30 years of engine grease, shot knees, and skipped lunches, all folded into a damp envelope for my daughter's wedding. I kept it. Here's why I walked away. The air conditioning in my 2004 Ford hadn't worked since the Obama administration. By the time I turned onto the winding, tree-lined avenue of the gated community, my undershirt was glued to my spine. I kept reaching up, running a calloused thumb under the stiff collar of my dress shirt. I'd bought the suit at a discount rack 3 days ago. It smelled like industrial fabric sizing and old dust. It didn't fit right. The shoulders pinched and the trousers rode up, but I didn't care. I was going to my daughter's engagement party. Chloe had told me it was just going to be a small, intimate gathering at her fiancé's family home. Pierce was his name. He was in finance or wealth management or whatever vague title people with soft hands use to describe moving invisible money around. I'd met him once. He had a firm handshake, but he looked at my fingernails permanently stained with a fine border of motor oil for a second too long. The driveway of the estate wasn't paved. It was covered in crushed white stone that crunched under my worn-out tires with a rich, heavy sound. The house looked like a damn museum. 3 stories of limestone, towering arched windows, and manicured hedges that smelled sharp and aggressively green. I pulled up behind a line of cars, a Porsche, a Mercedes SUV, an Audi that looked like a spaceship, and my bruised, rust-flecked pickup truck. A kid in a white polo shirt and khaki slacks stepped up to my window. He looked at my truck, then at me, his smile tight and practiced. "Valet parking, sir. Delivery entrance is around the back." "I'm a guest," I said. My voice sounded too loud, too gravelly in the quiet, manicured air. The kid blinked, recovered, and opened the door. I stepped out, my knees popping the way they always did. I handed him the keys. He held them by the very edge of the key ring, like they might infect him. Before I walked toward the massive oak front doors, I pressed my hand against my chest. The envelope was there, the stiff, rectangular shape of it pressed back against my ribs. $100,000. I had sold the auto repair shop. The shop I built from the ground up, the shop where Chloe used to sit on a stool by the register doing her math homework while I changed brake pads. I'd cashed out my entire life, put the money into a high-yield account for my own retirement. But then, well, she was getting married, and Pierce's family had money, old money. I didn't want my girl starting her new life feeling like a charity case. I wanted to hand her this envelope and tell her, "Your old man took care of it. You're an equal." The front doors were open. A waiter in a black vest glided past with a silver tray of champagne flutes. The condensation on the glasses caught the afternoon light. I stepped inside, and the cold, heavily air-conditioned air hit the sweat on my neck, making me shiver. The foyer smelled like lilies and lemon polish. The floor was seamless marble. I felt profoundly, acutely aware of the scuff marks on my discount dress shoes. There was a low, rhythmic hum of conversation drifting from the backyard and the main living areas, the kind of murmuring rich people do, where no one ever has to shout to be heard. I wandered through the hallway trying to look like I belonged, trying to find my daughter. I passed a dining room where the table was set with heavy silver and plates that looked too thin to eat off of. Everything was white and gold and sterile. I rubbed my thumb against my index finger, feeling the familiar, rough ridges of my calluses. I felt like a stray dog that had wandered into a sterile laboratory. I just needed to find Chloe. I just needed to see her smile, give her the envelope, and maybe retreat to the corner with a beer. I found her near the conservatory. The afternoon sun was spilling through massive glass panes, illuminating a crowd of people wearing pastel linens and tailored summer dresses. Chloe looked beautiful, but she didn't look like Chloe. She was wearing a cream-colored silk dress that draped perfectly over her shoulders. Her hair, which usually fought a losing battle with humidity, was ironed flat and sleek. She had a delicate champagne glass pinched between her fingers, and she was laughing at something a tall, older woman was saying. The older woman, Pierce's mother, Diane, I assumed had a face that looked expensive, tight, smooth, and frozen in a polite, predatory smile. I took a step forward, raising my hand. Chloe. I didn't finish the word, because in that exact second, Chloe's eyes drifted past Diane's shoulder and landed on me. If I live to be 100, I will never forget the physical transformation of her face. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't joy. It was terror. Pure, unadulterated panic. The blood drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking like a porcelain doll. Her eyes darted frantically to Diane, then to Pierce, who was chatting with some men a few feet away, and then back to me. Her jaw tightened. The panic mutated into something worse. Annoyance. Shame. I froze. My foot was half raised, my hand still hovering in the air. The heavy knot of my cheap tie suddenly felt like a noose. Chloe murmured something to Diane, set her glass down on a passing tray with a sharp clink, and walked toward me. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She walked with the stiff, rapid strides of someone trying to put out a fire. Before I could even open my mouth to say hello, she was on me. She grabbed me by the tricep. Her acrylic nails bit through the cheap polyester of my suit jacket. "What are you doing?" she hissed, her voice barely a breath, her lips barely moving so the people behind her wouldn't notice. It's the party," I stammered. My brain was lagging behind the reality of the situation. "You said Saturday. The engagement." "I said I would call you after," she whispered frantically, shoving me backward. She was physically pushing me out of the hallway, toward a heavy wooden door tucked away under the grand staircase. "Dad, move. Just get in here." She pushed open the door and shoved me inside. It was a butler's pantry. Smelled like copper polish and roasted garlic. Floor-to-ceiling shelves stacked with crystal glassware. The door clicked shut, cutting off the soft jazz and the murmur of the wealthy. We stood in the dim, cramped space. The only light came from a small, frosted window near the ceiling. "Chloe, what the hell is going on?" I asked, my voice trembling. Not from anger, not yet. From a deep, sickening confusion. My stomach felt like it was floating in acid. "You can't be here," she said, her chest heaving. She reached up and rubbed her temples, ruining a stray piece of her perfectly flat hair. "Dad, I told you this was just a networking thing. It's not for family." "Not for family?" I repeated stupidly. "I saw Pierce's parents out there. I saw his sister." "That's different," she snapped. She looked at me, really looked at me. Her eyes scanned my poorly fitted collar, the fraying cuffs of my shirt, the dark, permanent grease lines embedded in the creases of my knuckles. I watched her take inventory of her father. I watched her find me severely lacking. "How is it different, Chloe?" She crossed her arms, defensive. "Pierce's dad is bringing on 3 new partners today. These people they are high society. Dad, they care about lineage. They care about appearances. And I don't fit the appearance." It wasn't a question. She sighed, a frustrated put-upon sound that she used to make when she was a teenager, and I asked her to clean her room. "Don't do this. Don't play the victim. You showed up unannounced." "To my daughter's engagement party," I interjected, the acid in my stomach beginning to burn its way up my throat. Suddenly, the heavy door rattled, the brass handle turned, and the door cracked open. "Chloe, darling, are you in here?" It was Diane's voice, smooth, rich, dripping with patronizing sweetness. Chloe flinched like she'd been struck. She spun around, blocking me with her body, and pulled the door open a few more inches to slip halfway out. "I'm here, Diane. Sorry. Just dealing with a minor issue." Diane peered through the gap. Her pale, icy blue eyes landed on me. I saw her nose twitch, just a fraction of an inch. "Oh, I didn't realize the caterers brought extra staff. Do we need more ice out front?" I opened my mouth to say, "I'm Arthur. I'm Chloe's father." But Chloe spoke first. Her voice was terrifyingly steady, too loud, too bright. "Yes, exactly," Chloe said. She didn't even look back at me. "He's with the rental company. He just came to check the inventory on the glassware. He was just leaving through the service exit. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard in my life. It roared in my ears. The blood rushed out of my head, leaving me dizzy, nauseous. The rental company. Diane smiled, satisfied. Wonderful. Make sure he uses the side path, dear. The valet gets so congested. I will, Chloe said. Diane's footsteps clicked away on the marble floor. Chloe shut the door and leaned against it, exhaling a massive, trembling breath, like she had just narrowly avoided a car crash. She turned back to me. The guilt was there, finally flickering in her eyes, but it was buried under a thick layer of self-preservation. Dad, I'm sorry, she whispered, stepping toward me. I'll explain later. I will. You have to go. Please. If they find out I lied, Pierce's father will judge him. They think my dad is. They think you're a retired logistics consultant living in Florida. A logistics consultant. I looked at the girl in front of me. I remembered holding her over a rusted sink when she was 4, washing the dirt off her knees. I remembered working a double shift on Christmas Eve so I could buy her the electric keyboard she wanted, the one she gave up playing after 2 months. I remembered the smell of the cheap boxed macaroni we ate on Tuesdays. She was ashamed of the dirt. She was ashamed of the macaroni. She was ashamed of the man who provided it. I didn't yell. In the movies, the father yells. He gives a grand, sweeping speech about the value of hard work, about family and loyalty, and the snobs get put in their place. I didn't have a grand speech. I just felt sick. My mouth tasted like old copper and bitter saliva. My chest ached, a physical heavy pressure right behind my sternum. I looked down at my hands, the thick calloused fingers, the knuckles swollen with early arthritis from turning wrenches in the freezing cold. I had traded my body, piece by piece, bone by bone, to give her the stepping stones she needed to walk away from me, and she had taken them. She had sprinted across them. Dad, say something, Chloe pleaded, but she kept her voice low. She was still terrified. Someone outside might hear the rental guy talking back. I slowly reached into my jacket. My hand was shaking, not violently, but a fine, pathetic tremor that I couldn't stop. I slid my fingers into the breast pocket and pulled out the crisp, white envelope. The edges were slightly damp from my sweat. Chloe frowned, looking at it. What is that? I sold the shop, I said. My voice was completely hollow. It didn't even sound like me. It sounded like an old man speaking from the bottom of a well. Closed the deal on Tuesday. Chloe's eyes widened. She knew what that shop meant to me. It was my identity. You sold it. Why? I tapped the envelope against my palm. The thick paper made a dull thwack sound in the quiet pantry. I knew Pierce's family had money, I said slowly, forcing the words through the lump of sawdust in my throat. I knew they were paying for this wedding, paying for the down payment on your new place. I didn't want you to feel lesser. I didn't want you to owe them. I held the envelope out toward her. She instinctively reached for it, her fingers brushing the paper. $100,000, I whispered. Cashier's check, clear and free. Her breath hitched. She stared at the envelope, her eyes reflecting a sudden, desperate greed, mixed with the dawning horror of what she had just done. $100,000. To her new family, it was a rounding error. To me, it was my entire past and my entire future, distilled into a piece of paper. As her fingers closed around the edge of the envelope, I tightened my grip. I looked into her eyes. The brown eyes she inherited from her mother. They were slick with tears now, but I couldn't tell if she was crying for me or crying because she realized she was about to lose the money. But, I said, my voice finally hardening, a dark, cynical edge cutting through the grief. Turns out, the guy from the rental company doesn't pay for the wedding. I pulled the envelope back. It slipped from her fingers. She gasped, a pathetic, choked sound. Dad, no. Wait. Dad, please. I'm a logistics consultant in Florida, I said, repeating her lie back to her. The words tasted like ash. I guess you better hope Pierce's dad has deep pockets. I turned my back on her. I didn't look at her face. I knew if I looked at her face, the little girl in the overalls would overlay the stranger in the silk dress, and I might break. I couldn't break. Not here. Not in a pantry surrounded by crystal glasses that cost more than my first car. I grabbed the heavy brass handle of the door. "Dad, stop," she hissed, grabbing my shoulder. "You can't just leave like this. Let's talk about it tomorrow. I'll make it right." I shrugged her hand off my shoulder. The fabric of my cheap suit rasped against her smooth palms. "There's nothing to talk about, Chloe," I said. "Enjoy your party." I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. The cold air conditioning hit me again, but this time I welcomed it. It numbed the sweat. I walked straight past the conservatory. I heard the clinking of glasses. I heard the soft, polite laughter. I saw Diane in my peripheral vision, holding a tiny cracker with caviar on it, looking right through me. To her, I was completely invisible. Just another laborer fading into the wallpaper. I pushed through the heavy oak front doors. The late afternoon heat hit me like a physical blow. Heavy and suffocating. But it was real. It smelled like asphalt and exhaust, not lilies and lemon polish. The valet kid saw me coming. He stood up a little straighter, probably expecting me to ask for directions to the service exit. Instead, I walked right up to his podium. "My truck," I said. He looked confused. "Sir?" "The rusted Ford," I said, my voice dead flat. "Bring it around." He scrambled for the keys. I stood on the crushed gravel, feeling the sharp stones through the thin soles of my shoes. I pressed my hand against my chest one last time. The envelope was still there. It felt heavier now. $100,000 heavier. The truck pulled up, the engine rattling, squeaking, ruining the quiet elegance of the driveway. I tipped the kid a $5 bill, climbed into the cab, and put it in gear. I didn't look in the rearview mirror as I drove away. The drive back to the city was a blur of highway hypnosis and suffocating heat. The sun began to set, bleeding a bruised, violent purple across the smoggy horizon. I rolled the windows down, letting the hot, heavy wind whip through the cab of the truck, carrying the smell of hot asphalt and diesel exhaust. It was a harsh, ugly smell, but it was honest. It was a hell of a lot more honest than the lemon polish and lilies back at the estate. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. The arthritis in my left hand was throbbing, a dull, rhythmic ache that kept time with the thump of the tires over the expansion joints of the interstate. Every time I hit a bump, the stiff edge of the envelope in my breast pocket tapped against my ribs. $100,000. 30 years of my life, distilled into a piece of paper, currently doing nothing but mocking me. I didn't go straight home. I couldn't face the silence of my house yet. I pulled off at a battered strip mall 2 towns over and parked in front of a neon sign that buzzed with a dying, flickering R, a liquor store. The bell above the door jangled a cheap tinny sound. The air inside smelled like stale cardboard and floor wax. I walked past the rows of imported wines with their elegant labels, the kind of bottles Chloe and her new family were probably opening right now. I went straight to the back and grabbed a bottle of mid-tier bourbon. The heavy glass felt grounding in my hand. When I finally pulled into my own driveway, it was fully dark. My house sat at the end of a dead-end street. It was a small, single-story ranch. The paint on the siding was peeling, curling away from the wood like dead skin. The front porch had a slight sag on the left side where the foundation was settling. I sat in the truck for a long time, the engine ticking as it cooled down, just staring at the dark windows. I had lived in this house for 28 years. I had replaced the roof myself. I had snaked the drains, patched the drywall when Chloe accidentally threw a baseball through the hallway, and spent countless evenings sitting on that sagging porch, drinking a beer and thinking about how to pay the property taxes. I could have fixed this place up. With a fraction of the money sitting in my pocket, I could have gutted the kitchen, fixed the foundation, maybe bought a truck with air conditioning. But I had saved it, hoarded it, starved my own comfort to feed her future. I grabbed the bottle and went inside. The house smelled like old dust, coffee grounds, and loneliness. It was stiflingly quiet, just the low, asthmatic hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked into the kitchen, set the bottle on the faded Formica table, and pulled the envelope out of my jacket. I tossed it onto the table. It landed with a soft, pathetic slap. I poured 2 fingers of bourbon into a water glass and drank it neat. It burned going down, a hot chemical fire that temporarily distracted me from the cold, hollow cavern opening up in my chest. Suddenly, my phone vibrated against the kitchen counter. The cheap plastic rattled against the wood, a jarring, aggressive noise in the silent house. The screen lit up the dark room with a sickly bluish glow. Chloe. I stared at the name. My thumb hovered over the green accept button. My heart did a stupid, hopeful flutter. Maybe she left. Maybe she realized what she did and she's sitting in her car, crying, wanting her dad. The phone stopped vibrating. Missed call. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Then it vibrated again and again. Over the next 2 hours, as I sat in the dark and slowly worked my way through a third of the bottle, the phone lit up 14 times. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I didn't trust my own voice. I didn't trust my own anger. Around midnight, the call stopped, replaced by the notification chime for voicemails. I finally reached over, my fingers thick and clumsy, and tapped the screen. The audio played through the tinny speaker, echoing in the empty kitchen. The first message was hushed, frantic. The sound of a classical string quartet played softly in the background. Dad, it's me. Look, you can't just drive off like that. Diane asked where the rental guy went, and I had to make up a story about you forgetting an invoice. You're making this incredibly weird. Call me back right now. No apology, just damage control. I took another sip of bourbon. The ice in the glass clicked against my teeth. The second message came 20 minutes later. The background was quieter. She sounded breathless, angry. I don't know why you're throwing a tantrum. I was protecting you, Dad. Do you have any idea how these people judge outsiders? They would have looked at your suit, your hands, and they would have eaten you alive. I saved you from that. And you dangling that check in my face, that was cruel. That money was for my future. Call me. She had twisted it. She had warped the reality so violently that she was the victim, protecting me from the wolves, and I was the cruel tyrant withholding her inheritance. The mental gymnastics made me nauseous. The third message was the one that broke the dam. It was left at 11:45 p.m. The background was dead silent. She was crying, not the delicate, polite tears she probably cried at sad movies with Pierce, but the raw, ugly, wet sobbing of a terrified child. Daddy. Her voice hitched. Daddy, please. I'm sorry. Okay? I'm so sorry. I panicked. I'm in so deep here. Pierce's dad wants us to host a rehearsal dinner at the country club, and it's $30,000. I don't have it. Pierce doesn't have it in liquid cash. They expect me to contribute. Dad, they think I'm an equal. If I don't have that money, they'll know I'm nothing. They'll know I'm just a mechanic's daughter from the east side. Please, call me back. A mechanic's daughter, she said it like it was a terminal disease. I rested my forehead against the cool, hard edge of the Formica table. The alcohol had stopped warming me. It was just making me dizzy and terribly, unspeakably sad. She wasn't crying because she hurt me. She was crying because her facade was crumbling, and the bank was closed. She didn't want her father. She wanted the logistics consultant's money. I slept in the chair. I woke up at 6 a.m. with a stiff neck, a pounding headache, and a mouth that tasted like old pennies. The morning sun was slicing through the cheap blinds, illuminating the dust motes, dancing in the air. The envelope was still on the table. In the harsh daylight, it looked less like a gift and more like a ransom note. I went to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and looked in the mirror. My eyes were bloodshot, the skin under them bruised and heavy. I looked old, I looked like a man who had spent his life building a bridge for someone else to cross, only for them to burn it the second they reached the other side. I walked back to the kitchen, picked up the envelope, and slid it into the back pocket of my jeans. I wasn't going to wear the suit today. At 9 a.m., I was standing in the lobby of my local credit union. The air conditioning was humming, and the place smelled distinctly of ozone, cheap carpet cleaner, and printer toner. It was a far cry from the marble floors of the estate. I walked up to the teller. It was Brenda. I'd known her for 15 years. She had a bowl of hard candies on her desk and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. "Morning, Arthur," she smiled, her eyes crinkling. "Thought you'd be sleeping in, what with the shop being closed and all. How was the big engagement party?" My stomach gave a sick little lurch. I forced the corners of my mouth up. "It was quite an event, Brenda. Quite an event." "Did you give her the envelope?" she asked, lowering her voice like we were co-conspirators. She had helped me draw up the cashier's check on Tuesday. She knew exactly what was in it. I reached into my back pocket, pulled out the crumpled envelope, and slid it under the thick glass divider. "Change of plans," I said. My voice sounded remarkably steady. "I need to redeposit this, put it back into the high-yield retirement account." Brenda looked at the envelope, then up at me. Her smile faded. She had been a teller long enough to read the subtext of a returned cashier's check for $100,000. She didn't ask questions. She just nodded, her face softening with a quiet, devastating pity. "Right away, Arthur," she said gently. I stood there and watched her type. I listened to the clack of the keyboard, the whir of the receipt printer. She picked up a heavy rubber stamp and slammed it down on the check. Thwack. Void. The sound echoed in my chest. It was done. The money was locked away. The ransom was off the table. She slid a thin, white receipt back under the glass. I took it, folded it neatly, and walked out into the morning heat. I felt lighter, but it wasn't the lightness of relief. It was the lightness of an empty vessel. When I turned onto my street, I saw it immediately. It looked like an alien spacecraft had landed in a junkyard. A sleek, silver BMW was parked half in my driveway, half on the dead, yellow grass of my front lawn. The engine was off, but I could hear the faint, high-pitched whine of the cooling fans. I pulled my rusty Ford up behind it, threw it in park, and cut the engine. Chloe was sitting on the bottom step of my sagging porch. She had traded the silk dress for a pair of designer jeans and a beige cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my mortgage payment. She was wearing oversized sunglasses, but I could see the tension in her jaw. The moment my truck door slammed, she flinched, standing up quickly. The contrast was jarring. The sharp, expensive lines of her clothes against the peeling paint of the house she grew up in. As I walked toward her, the gravel crunching under my work boots, the smell of her perfume, sandalwood and something sharp, like citrus, hit me. Battling the familiar scent of damp earth and rotting porch wood, we stood 4 feet apart. Neither of us moved to bridge the gap. She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red, the skin around them puffy. She looked exhausted, cornered. "You deposited it," she said. It wasn't a question. She had a notification on her phone, or maybe she had called the bank, claiming to be me. I didn't care to ask. "I did," I said. My voice was low, flat. I crossed my arms over my chest, feeling the fabric of my flannel shirt. "It's back in the retirement account." "Why?" she demanded, her voice cracking. The panic was rising in her throat again, making her pitch higher. "Dad, I left you voicemails. I explained everything. I told you I needed it. You told me you needed the money." I corrected her, keeping my tone perfectly level. "You didn't say you needed me." She ran a hand through her hair, frustrated. The manicured nails looked like talons. "Are we really doing this? Are we really doing the wounded pride thing right now? I made a mistake. Okay." I panicked in the moment. She's terrifying. She judges everything. I was just trying to survive the afternoon by telling them I was the rental guy. "Yes," she shouted, throwing her hands up. "Because look at you. You showed up in a suit that looked like it was from a thrift store, smelling like exhaust. What was I supposed to say?" Hey everyone, here's my dad. He changes oil for a living. Please don't mind the grease under his fingernails. The words hung in the air, vicious and raw. She gasped softly, slapping a hand over her mouth, realizing what she had just said out loud. The ugly, unspoken truth she had been carrying for years. I looked down at my hands. The thick, calloused skin, the dark lines in the knuckles. I didn't feel ashamed of them. I felt a sudden, fierce wave of pride. These hands had bought the food she ate, the clothes she wore, the college degree she used to get the job where she met Pierce. You didn't have to say anything, I said quietly. You just had to let me be your father. But I'm not, am I? I'm a logistics consultant in Florida. Chloe closed her eyes, tears squeezing out from beneath her lashes. Dad, please, you don't understand the world I'm in now. Pierce's family, they have trusts. They have investments. Before we get married, his father is making us sign a prenup. It's ironclad. If I walk into this marriage with zero assets, I am nothing to them. I have no power. That 100,000 was going to be my buy-in, an investment in Pierce's new fund. It proves I'm an equal partner. Without it, I'm just the gold digger they all whisper I am. The contradiction of it was staggering. She was terrified of being poor, terrified of being looked down upon. So she was begging the poor father she looked down upon to buy her way into the snobbery. So the money was to buy their respect, I said, spelling it out slowly. And you lied about me to buy their respect. I did what I had to do, she pleaded, stepping closer, her hand reaching out to grab my arm. I took a step back. Her hand fell to her side. Chloe, I said, feeling a heavy, crushing weight settle onto my shoulders. The anger was gone. Only a profound, suffocating grief remained. You built a whole life on a foundation of lies. You're ashamed of where you came from. You're ashamed of me. And you want me to hand over my life savings to fund the very lie that erases my existence. She stared at me, her chest heaving. The mascara was starting to run, tracking dark lines down her pale cheeks. I can't do it, I said. I won't do it. Handing you that check doesn't protect you. It just pays for my own funeral in your life. You're punishing me, she spat, the sorrow instantly curdling into venom. The mask was slipping entirely now. The desperate child was gone, replaced by a ruthless survivor who realized the negotiation had failed. You're doing this out of spite, because you're jealous. Jealous? I let out a dry, humorless bark of a laugh. Yes, jealous, she screamed, the sound echoing off the peeling houses on the street. A neighbor's dog started barking in the distance. Jealous that I got out. Jealous that I'm not stuck in this pathetic, dying neighborhood, dying of black lung or whatever it is you people get. You want to keep me down here with you. I looked at the girl standing on my porch. I searched her face, looking for the 4-year-old who used to fall asleep on my chest while I watched baseball. I looked for the teenager who cried when she didn't make the cheer squad and let me make her hot chocolate. She wasn't there. She had been evicted, replaced by a stranger wearing expensive cashmere and terrified eyes. I didn't yell back. I didn't defend myself. I just turned my back on her. I walked up the 2 wooden steps, my boots making a heavy, hollow sound. I unlocked the front door and pushed it open. The smell of stale coffee and old dust greeted me. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Dad, she shrieked behind me. Dad, don't you dare walk away from me. If you close that door, we're done. Do you hear me? You'll never see me again. You won't be at the wedding. You won't know your grandchildren. I stopped in the doorway. I didn't turn around. I rested my hand on the wooden doorframe. I didn't walk away, Chloe, I said to the dark hallway. You pushed me out the service exit yesterday. I'm just finally taking the hint. I stepped inside and closed the door. I didn't slam it. I shut it quietly, letting the latch click firmly into place. I stood in the dim hallway, the silence of the house pressing against my eardrums. Outside, I heard her scream in frustration, a raw, guttural sound. I heard the sharp clack of her heels on the gravel. I heard the heavy door of the BMW slam shut, shaking the loose glass in my front window. The engine roared to life, revving aggressively, and tires squealed as she reversed out of the driveway, tearing up a patch of the dead lawn. The sound faded down the street, merging with the distant hum of highway traffic. I walked into the kitchen. The envelope was gone. The bourbon bottle was still on the table. I picked it up, walked to the sink, and poured the rest of it down the drain. The sharp smell of alcohol filled the small space. I filled the kettle with tap water and turned on the stove. The burner clicked, catching with a ring of blue flame. I stood there, watching the water heat up, listening to the ticking of the kitchen clock. My pocket was empty. My house was empty. But as I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the dust and the quiet, I realized something else. I wasn't holding my breath anymore. The heavy, crushing pressure behind my sternum, the anxiety of not being enough, the fear of embarrassing her, the desperate need to buy her love was gone. It was a terrible, agonizing freedom. But it was freedom. The silence after a door shuts for the final time is the loudest sound in the world. I traded my life savings for my self-respect, and though my house is quiet today, my conscience is finally clear. If you've ever had to walk away from someone you love to protect your own dignity, you know this kind of invisible pain. Drop a like to show your support. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more raw, real stories. You're never alone.